Success! Oh, hi. Glad you're here. I'm glad to be with you. Today I'm going to talk about 2019 and the movies released that year that impacted me the most. What a year 2019 was. Huh? You know, the year the world ended. But we didn't care until the following year. But boy, this was the last year, as far as movie going, that things were the way they were until, man, we were pretty busy yesterday, actually. Anyway, um, um, well, I'm gonna, let's bookend it. Since I'm gonna end with the most impactful, let's begin with the biggest movie of that year, Avengers Endgame. I mean, I've said it before. I said it in the Infinity War. I've said it, okay, I'll say it again. The Russo brothers achieving some of the greatest cinematic achievements ever. I mean, Infinity War was one thing, but then you have Endgame, what I would consider the greatest comic book movie ever made. Well, aside from the first Spider-Verse. The end battle, one of the most rewarding sequences of all time. You got Giant Man, you got Cap whispering, assemble. I mean, come on. Come on. That movie with the Portis. Okay, well, here's the thing. So, this movie came out like right after I was promoted to supervisor at my job. Before I was then promoted as manager. But as a supervisor, I was able to see the early, what we call QCs, where we have to screen the movie to make sure, everything looks good. And depending on the movie, sometimes they unlock a couple of days early. Sometimes they unlock, literally midnight that day of its release. And all of the management team and my coworkers were gonna watch. They were gonna watch Infinity War at midnight. And then Endgame. Yeah, those suckers were there till like 5 a.m. I said, heck no. And they were watching it in the Dolby. I'll see Dolby, sure, unless my other option is 3D. I wanted to see this in 3D, very much so. So I asked one of my coworkers, hey man, hook me up at midnight. I know y'all will be in Dolby watching your Infinity War. I want to watch Endgame at midnight. So I watched Endgame at midnight, the like Thursday of its release, so before anybody else. Before its, official release, what, 13 hours later or something? Anyway, in 3D by myself. Yeah, I experienced Endgame in an empty theater. But I couldn't believe, oh my gosh, here we had a time travel story, one of the greatest time travel stories there is. They really pulled that off, let me tell you. And so many wonderful things. Ant-Man being my favorite MCU character. It was great. It was a wonderful, exhilarating experience. I love watching movies by myself. Which is how I do most of them now as a manager. I just, oh, I'm closed and I'm the only one here. I'm going to go watch this movie now. But I remember leaving at like, what was it, 2:30 in the morning? And they're like just finishing up Infinity War, and I'm like, haha, they have no idea that Tony's gonna die. Spoiler alert. But I, at first viewing, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, and I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know. I don't know if I really, loved it or. I mean, it was okay. Like, I felt underwhelmed, which is an insane thing to think. But again, it could have had to do with an empty theater. It could have had to do with being 2 o'clock in the morning. It could have to do with a lot of things. It wasn't until my second, third, fourth, viewings that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a freaking masterpiece. But I saw it a second time that night when it did release in its premiere showing to the public with my son. And that was an exhilarating experience with that crowd. It was. I'll never forget hearing all the sniffles when Tony died. Everyone in that theater was teary-eyed, and you could even hear grown men weeping. So wonderful, one-of-a-kind, once-in-a-lifetime experience that I'm very, very glad that I had overall. Avengers Endgame. The fact that they achieved that film to that scale, for it to be perfect, blows my mind. And again, the Russo brothers also made some of the greatest comedies of all time. Welcome to Collinwood, Arrested Development. It's insane. Guns Akimbo is a movie that I'm like, okay, that looks silly. Maybe I'll watch it one day, with Daniel Radcliffe. And then one day I saw it, and yeah, it's a silly, insane premise. But as far as filmmaking, that movie is masterfully crafted. Like the way it's edited, everything about Guns Akimbo is amazing. That is a phenomenal film. That movie shocked me with how good it is. So, figured I should mention it. 2019, a Critters movie came out called Critters Attack. There's a lot of Critters movies, and I was a huge, huge fan growing up of the original Critters trilogy. Loved all three of those movies. Then they made a couple more that were okay, but then they came back with this one, and this one at the end, spoiler alert, brought back the mom from the originals. So I just remember that being a grand old time watching that at home on streaming with the boy. The live-action Aladdin came out in 2019, and my holy grail of original Disney animated films when I was growing up was Pinocchio, The Little Mermaid, and Aladdin. I even remember when we screened Aladdin in middle school, and then that's when everyone, started whispering and whatnot about the infamous "take off your clothes" line, which you may or may not be aware of. I highly doubt it's available now. I'm sure they expunged it on Disney Plus. But if you had the original VHS copy of Aladdin, on the balcony scene, there's when the tiger is growling at Aladdin and he's backing up to the balcony or something. There's at one point during the balcony scene before they get on the rug, they cut to, and if you cranked up the volume all the way, you could very faintly hear Aladdin whispering to Jasmine, "Take off your clothes." True story. True story. Heard it with my own ears many occasion. I had that film on VHS, but we're not talking about the animated. So then when they were remaking Aladdin, I was like, okay, here we go. This is my first of the three that have all three now been remade. That I was like, all right, is this going to be good? Because this is, and it was okay. That's how I feel about the live action Aladdin. It's all right. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's hard to replace the murdering Robin Williams with the bitch slapping bully. But it did have the new Pink Ranger as Jasmine. So it was alright. I eventually got around, probably during the pandemic, to watching The Lighthouse. I'm a big fan of Robert Eggers. Although the only reason this poster remains on my wall permanently is because Bjork's on it. But I do love The Northman. I absolutely love The Northman. We'll talk about that one later. But when I got around to watching The Lighthouse, I could not fathom what I was seeing, and it was the most insane, original, psychotic film I'd ever seen in my life. Well, till Men. And, like, just literally, it's a movie of witnessing two men get drunk and lose their minds. And boy, is it entertaining for it. Both Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson are phenomenal in that film, and that ending. But it's literally 2 hours of watching men get belligerently drunk and go psychotic. Good time. And the foghorn in the background, periodically throughout the film, oh, brilliant. So you got to mention The Lighthouse. Just like you've got to mention Quentin Tarantino's his last film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Great film. Never forget. I love it. Even has Tarantino's little cameo. I forgot to talk about Tarantino's cameo. Well, that was in my other review. But Tarantino's got a cameo in all of his movies, even the ones you don't know about, like Kill Bill has him as one of the bodies on the floor after she gets all the crazy 88s. My favorite of his is Jackie Brown's cameo, where he's the voice of the answering machine. You have one message. And then it took me a couple of views to realize, well, where's his cameo in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? It's at the end, like in the end credits, he's telling Rick Dalton action and cut. Close enough. That's a cameo. But Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I'll never forget because it's the last time that I saw a film with both of my brothers. And my father? No, I think it was just both my brothers because I was worried about my one brother who always falls asleep in movies because he drinks too much. Or did, I guess. But he didn't fall asleep during this. And seeing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood opening weekend with a sold out crowd was a phenomenal experience because that particular movie, excuse me, is all build up. It's all build up, especially when you don't know yet. Like, spoiler alert, we knew that it was going to deal with, the Manson family and obviously Shannon Tate. That's her name, right? Sharon Tate, excuse me. Forgive me. But what we didn't know, even though we'd had seen Inglourious Basterds, so we should have known it was a possibility that Tarantino could just change history. But first of all, the whole movie is just this one big build-up to that insane sequence that's extraordinarily violent and graphic. So you're getting pampered and comforted all along, but not really prepared. And then, BAM! Holy crap. So that theater's reaction, with the attacking dogs or the smashing the chick's face against the phone. She's on fire in this movie, and then she ends up on fire in Scream 5. It's funny. You got Austin Butler, my introduction to him, but he's fantastic in the film. Great movie. Phenomenal. Personally, I don't think that Brad Pitt's character killed his wife. I believe he wanted to, and was being very careless with the spear gun, but it was the sudden bump that actually triggered the spear gun. He probably didn't really mind, but I don't think he intentionally pulled that trigger. That's just my personal opinion. But that's neither here nor there. I just remember seeing that movie, and it just blew us all away. It's always a joy to see a Tarantino movie in theaters for the first time. But yeah, but then it subverted our expectations, thinking that, oh no, we have to witness the murder of Sharon Tate. And then no, you just get to see some Manson family clan members, cult, that's the word I was looking for, Manson cult family members, Manson family cult members, yeah, get the crap beat out of them and kill. And then Sharon Tate survives. And that's when they have the title card, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because it's a fairy tale. It's Tarantino going, I want to tell a fairy tale about Hollywood. And in my perfect happily ever after movie with a happy ending, she lives. Wouldn't that have been something? If they went to the wrong house and Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth or something, I can't remember, and Brad Pitt beat the crap out of him. Love it. Flamethrower. Good foreshadowing. What the heck? Oh, Shaft. Shaft. Let me tell you, when the other Shaft came out in the early 2000s, I saw that in theater. Absolutely loved it. I love Shaft, especially Samuel L. Jackson as Shaft. Oh, phenomenal. I don't know if I might have mentioned it in one of the past videos, but then there was that scene with the bad guy pooping while trying to intimidate Shaft or someone. And it was just, that scene stuck with me. Like, why am I watching a guy poop with the door open? Don't poop with the door open. Even if you're trying to intimidate somebody. That's disgusting. Anyway. But then they did a new Shaft with Samuel Jackson returning as Shaft. Only this time it was like a 3-generation thing. You had the OG Shaft as his dad, and then you had Sammy J as Shaft, and then you had this new kid as Shaft's kid. Good time. Good movie. I enjoyed it. Oh, speaking of Samuel L. Jackson, I gotta mention Glass. I love Glass. Unbreakable was one of my favorite M. Night Shyamalan, is one of my favorite M. Night Shyamalan movies ever, if not my favorite M. Night Shyamalan movie. Like, that movie's phenomenal. Period, the end. That movie's phenomenal. And then I was like, Split, okay, wasn't really interested. I think that movie's okay and all, especially for what it is, especially What's-His-Face's performance. Yeah, it's great, but overall, I'm like, meh. So I never got around to really seeing it right away, and then so obviously the ending was spoiled for me before I saw it, and I was like, wait, what? Which is what got me to eventually see it, and I'm like, holy cow, this is cool that it's in the same universe as Unbreakable, and there's Unbreakable! And then he's like, okay, well, we're gonna make one more, Glass, with the 3 of them. You got Glass, you got Unbreakable, and you got Split. And apparently I'm in the minority. I love Glass. I thought Glass was phenomenal. Great time, great movie, great completion to a very unique, unexpected trilogy. So, Glass. They call me Mr. Glass. 1917, why wouldn't I mention it? That's an amazing film that looks like it's a single shot with very few cuts, and even Tarantino himself has raved about it. Well, no, or is it that one he was talking smack because he doesn't like cheat cuts? I don't know. Look it up. Something like that. He talked about it once. I was watching something. But 1917, great film. Great film. Any movie that has a single shot throughout, like Birdman, but this one in particular being in a battle, in a war of this kid. Here's your mission. You got to get from point A to point B, and then we just are right there with him for 2 hours. Absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And speaking of war films, there's another movie that surprisingly is directed by Ronald Emmerich, who's known for things like the 90s Godzilla, or Independence Day, or The Day After Tomorrow, or 2012, or the Independence Day sequel. But those big blockbuster destruction end of the world movies. And then he goes and directs a true story called Midway. And I eventually saw it. It was very popular in my theater at the time, and I was like, man, I ended up getting some free marketing materials like a Midway t-shirt and some aviator sunglasses. But when I eventually got around to seeing Midway, that is a phenomenal movie. What an absolutely amazing film. I love Midway. Midway is very underrated. If you haven't seen Midway, I highly recommend it, especially if you're interested in history or that era or military. I had never heard of that story because it's Pearl Harbor, right? It has to do with Pearl Harbor and like what happened before or after? After. So it's like Pearl Harbor, which has gotten so much attention in the past, is like that's like the background story. Where Midway was like, holy crap, I had no idea that some of these kids went through this, and it's exhilarating. Phenomenal film. I'll mention The Irishman because it's Martin Scorsese, and it's, holy crap, like a 3-4 hour, whatever the heck it is, opus that's, yes, very similar to Goodfellas in a way. I mean, it's Martin Scorsese. But overall, it's just what an amazing story. And then that ending with Robert De Niro's character. Sometimes that's just how it goes. So that's a brutal, honest, bareback, no apology, unapologetic film. Like The Irishman actually is phenomenal. I really thoroughly enjoyed that movie. I gotta mention Lucy in the Sky because Noah Wyle directed a film, and I didn't even know that until recently, and I recently saw Lucy in the Sky. And I'm like, wait, is this the only movie he's directed so far? I think I know why. I mean, this guy gave me some of the greatest things of entertainment I've ever seen in my life, period. Between the FX television series Legion and the FX television series Fargo, every single season, that's some of the best things I've ever seen in my life, period. The end. So his movie with Natalie Portman, based on a true story, very, very good, very, very intrigued, very interesting story. The true story, I remember hearing it on the news when I was younger, and I was like, oh, wait, this sounds familiar. Yeah, so a very good movie. Noah Wyle's a very great director, but his style is more structured for television. And I think the reason why Lucy in the Sky didn't do very well is it throws you off a lot with the aspect ratio changing so frequently. I understand why it's done, and it's done in certain way. Like, this is representing out in space. This is representing being here on Earth. This is representing, losing your mind. This is representing keeping things together. But it was just so frequently, it was very distracting. I get why he did that, but in a film, it takes you out of it a lot more than like in a television show. Because TV is made for a certain aspect ratio, where a film is made for, like, if I'd have seen that in the theaters, it just would have drove me nuts. But overall, it's a good movie, and I'm looking forward to his Alien television show. That's going to blow our freaking minds. Well, now with the writer's strike, who knows if we'll ever get that. That was in, like, pre-production, for goodness sake. Anyway. The King, I believe, was a victim of the pandemic, which pushed it to streaming. But I did eventually see The King, starring Timothy Chalamet, and that's a phenomenal film. Absolutely phenomenal. I highly recommend it. See The King. Just see it. It's on Netflix, and it stars Timothy Chalamet. That's all you need to know. Just go watch it. It's great. Oh my gosh. We'll talk about Us. What's his name? Jordan Peele? Yeah. Wasn't a big fan of Get Out. Yeah. Sue me. Wasn't a big fan of Get Out. It was a very generic, predictable, yeah, we get it kind of story. Like, we understood the allegory quite well. Great. Not a huge fan. I absolutely loved, what's it called? Nope. Nope, I love. But Us is my favorite of his films. Yeah. I think some people don't give that movie enough credit. I think Us is very creative, original, unique. Sure, the ending's a little like, well, but this doesn't make sense and that doesn't make sense. Well, it's a movie. It's not real life. The only time we should be questioning things making sense if it's reality. If it's entertainment, it's okay if it doesn't make sense. It's just supposed to entertain you. And Us entertains the heck out of me. I love that movie. And the usage of that one song and the fight sequence at the end and the twist. Loved Us. And you got freaking Kim Heidecker. Phenomenal in that movie. Doctor Sleep. I'm going to mention Doctor Sleep because that movie blew my freaking mind. Not only is it an amazing film, but when I watched it, I bought it. And I ended up watching the director's cut. And that's a tough watch. I understand why the director's cut is the director's cut and it's unrated and it was not released in theaters. Because I'm pretty sure, and especially from people I've asked who saw it in theaters, the scene isn't as graphic when spoiler alert, when the lovely this was my introduction to Rebecca Ferguson. Like, you know how sometimes you've seen them in movies, but then you see a movie that's where it sticks with you, and then you go back to oh right, she was in Mission Impossible. Yeah. So when I say my introduction to Rebecca Ferguson, it might not have been my first thing I've seen of hers, but it's when she stuck with me. Oh, hi there. I just discovered that like that was her improvising. Oh, I love that. Oh, hi there. Anyway, she's a beautiful woman. And she's fantastic in this film. But spoiler alert, the scene where and it has the dude from season 2 of Fargo, the Native American guy I became an instant fan of his in Fargo because he's so amazing in that show. And then here he was in Doctor Sleep, and I'm like, heck yeah, it's that guy. See Fargo, the TV series, every season, please. It'll be the greatest thing you've ever seen. But in Doctor Sleep, so there's the scene where they murder a young boy. Like torture, kill, brutally murder while he's screaming, begging, and pleading for his life. He's what, like 12, 13 maybe? And it's rough. Especially as a father of a son that's a similar age. Like, that child actor, holy cow. Give that kid an Oscar for that scene. I was terrified for that boy's life. Like, you literally watch them kill him as he's and rip him apart and suck out his soul as he's screaming, begging, and pleading. That's brutal. Yeah, you ain't gonna put that in theaters. You're gonna put that on the unrated Blu-ray. But it's a tough watch. I don't know if I'll probably skip that scene anytime I watch this movie from now on. But absolutely phenomenal film. The way it's both a sequel to the original film and also the book because they have different endings. Very clever. Very clever. Okay, when I got around to seeing when Midsommar was out in my theater, everybody kept singing. I'm like, meh, whatever. I don't like horror. I wouldn't even call Midsommar a horror. The director's cut, maybe. And my theater ended up getting the director's cut later. And it was very popular. People coming up, oh, we're going to see the director's cut. And I'm like, whatever. I'm not interested in this. And then one day, I sat down at home, years later, and I watched the movie Midsommar. And it was very much like my experience with There Will Be Blood. I watched it in chunks. I watched like the first half, went to work. All day at work, it's rattling around in my brain. Couldn't wait to get back and finish it. Got home, watched the second half. The ending of that movie had me in tears. Near the beginning of the film had me in shock and wanting to vomit. But Midsommar, immediately after completing it, I consider to be the greatest film I've ever seen. The greatest film ever made, in my opinion. Because I experience every single possible human emotion while watching it. I laugh, I cry, I'm in shock, I experience joy, I experience terror, I experience disgust. Like, that's filmmaking. When I'm feeling every possible emotion I possibly can in the span of 2.5 hours, holy cow. The greatest depiction I've ever seen of being on drugs. Some of the greatest acting I've ever seen of being on drugs. The ending, the cliff jump sequence, like everything about this movie. People consider it a horror. I don't think it's a horror. The director's cut that I eventually got my hands on and watched, that I will say is a horror because the director's cut has the deleted scene where she asks her boyfriend, spoiler alert, she asks her boyfriend, we gotta get out of here, and he pretty much says no. That's when it's a horror. She wants to leave, but he won't let her. Then it's a horror. But without that scene, it's a movie about a woman who doesn't belong and has no family and ends up finding a place where she feels she belongs and they become her new family. Pretty much. Period. The end. That's what that movie's about. It's a happy ending. She's miserable the whole film, never smiles, and the couple of times she does, they're fake smiles. But then at the very end, in that beautiful flower dress, when she's watching the place burn with that gorgeous music, she gives the most joyous, unencumbered, huge grin. And you feel she's finally happy. She's relieved. She feels she's where she's belonged. She's welcome. And that's when I wept. I'm like, oh my God, talk about the payoff of a film. Everything we've been through to lead to her finally being happy and finally giving a true smile for the first time. It was the biggest sense of overwhelming relief I have ever felt at the end of a film. Right up there with Daniel Day-Lewis. I'm finished! But Midsommar, a lot of people would consider it the greatest movie ever made. Those are the reasons why I would. Read my Letterboxd review. It's got a little picture of Captain Murphy, under Paul Charman. I go into exquisite detail about Midsommar and all the brilliance and hidden stuff and correlations and allegories that are in that film. It's genius. Cults are bad. But anyway. Just don't piss on the sacred tree, Adam Warlock. That's why you got cursed with being painted yellow. Last but not least, we'll end the way we began. The number one most impactful film I saw in 2019 was one of the last, because then things changed a few months later, but Star Wars. The Rise of Skywalker. When they released that trailer and we heard that laugh, I freaked the frick out. I had a reaction on my other channel, but that channel got deleted because Warner Brothers got pissed off that I kept posting clips of C-Lab 2021 because it was 2021. If anybody's gonna get you, it's Warner Brothers. They will take your stuff down so fast. Anyway, so Palpatine, you may or may not know, is my all-time number one favorite fictional character, period. Not just my favorite Star Wars character. He's my favorite fictional character, period. So discovering in the trailer that he was coming back, I don't give a crap. Somehow Palpatine returned. I literally have a t-shirt that says somehow Palpatine returned. That's okay. I don't mind. These movies can be as ridiculous as they want to be. They even have a dude from Lost saying, Sith cloners. Secret's only the Sith knew. Yeah, exactly. Okay, moving on. It doesn't matter why or how. Sheesh. Who cares? Anyway, I was very excited for this film, and then this was right after I'd become, literally 2 months after I had become a manager. So I finally had the ability to watch a movie whenever I wanted as soon as it unlocked. And so I was waiting all by myself in my building, alone, for this thing to unlock, trying to figure out how to start this movie on my own. And I watched before the rest of the world, like literally as the early reaction tweets were coming from the premiere. I watched The Rise of Skywalker all by myself. I went out and got some Taco Bell, and then I watched that movie by myself, and it was one of the funnest experiences I've ever had in a theater, especially by myself. Much like Midsommar, I had an experience of all kinds of emotions. I was laughing, I was hooting, I was hollering, I cried. The only Star Wars movie to make me cry. I cried at the return of Han Solo and that beautiful conversation with him and Kylo being a perfectly other side of the coin from the exact conversation they had in The Force Awakens. Absolutely beautiful. Spoiler alerts. I really was tricked. I thought Chewie died and was like, oh my god, he didn't die. When she stabbed Kylo during their lightsaber battle, I thought he was about to die, and I got so pissed. I started doing laps in the theater, and I went all the way up to the screen, and I said, you better heal him, because I knew about the healing stuff, because this came out right after that Mandalorian episode, so we knew it was, or no, she had that in the movie, that's right. The movie released the day after the Mandalorian episode, but I saw it the day of the Mandalorian episode before it dropped. So to most of the world, their introduction to the healing power was Grogu healing in that episode. But to me, my introduction to the healing power was Rey healing the snake. So I'm like, you better heal Kylo, and then she does. And then we get Ben Solo for a minute. We get the kiss. I was totally on board for that. But I just had a different experience as to where everyone else was already familiar with the healing power because Disney knew what they were doing with the timing. Or I guess I should say Lucasfilm. We give Disney too much credit. They own Lucasfilm, yes, but Lucasfilm is still responsible for Star Wars. Thank you very much. And then you have the two endgame moments with, but there are more of us, Poe. There are more of us. And then I am all the Sith. I am all the Jedi. It was great to hear their voices. Sure, it would have been nice to see their Force ghosts, but only 3 Jedi get that privilege. 4. Only 4 Jedi get that privilege of being a Force ghost, so it wouldn't make sense. Not every Jedi gets to be a Force ghost. It's complicated. Look it up. But overall, it was the most exhilarating experience I'd had in a theater, and I absolutely loved every single second of it. And the whole Rey being a Palpatine thing, hello. I mean, the whole child of one of his clones is kind of murky, but I loved how Snoke was Palpatine all along. Sweet. I loved that Rey was a Palpatine because it was planted. Whether or not they planned it for sure all along, it was definitely an idea that J.J. Abrams had in The Force Awakens. Because Rey's musical theme, word got around to John Williams. Rey's musical theme is the exact same as the Emperor's musical theme, only tweaked. They were foreshadowing this all along. Her theme, Emperor's theme. Oh, it's the same freaking song. There's a video about it on YouTube, and he'll break it down for you. Phenomenal movie. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker is the greatest Star Wars movie we'll ever see. I've said that The Last Jedi is the best movie that is Star Wars we'll ever see. But as far as Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker is the best Star Wars movie we'll ever see. JJ asked George, what should I do? George said, go full throttle, throw everything at the wall. And he did. Star Wars is supposed to be ridiculous and campy and silly. Okay. Like, don't take it seriously. It's a kid's movie. So I think The Rise of Skywalker is a phenomenal film. It's actually my 3rd favorite Star Wars film. Yeah, that's right. And the other 2 are prequels. Sue me. And I'm a literal lifelong Star Wars fan. I was born 21 days after the release of Return of the Jedi. I'm going to be 40 in 11 days. So, yeah, that was definitely the most impactful. And then I took my son. We had a blast. I was all about Kylo and Rey. I did have a theory that Palpatine wanted Rey to kill him so that he could possess her body. And what happens in the end? She kills him. So I believe Palpatine still possessed her body. And then at the end, when she says her name is Rey Skywalker, that's really Palpatine being like, I'm going to stick it to the Skywalkers and take their name for evil. That's just my headcanon. Anyway, great film. Very underrated. It's amazing. It's supposed to. It's everything it needs to be, that movie. I love it. I love The Rise of Skywalker and think it's a perfect Star Wars film. Okie dokie.